Hello and welcome to MIP TV. And with me, as always, is Bob Cook from the Manchester Institute for Psychotherapy. And we've got, I think it's a seminal book that
Yes.
we're going to review. And it's called, there's quite a long name, but I've written down the highlight, From Transactions to Relations, William F. Cornell and Helena Hargenden, two
Correct.
very big voices in the world of transactional analysis.
Yes, absolutely.
And I'm immediately, just off camera, we were just talking about, I was just writing the book down, and I thought, this sounds like an arc of a journey from Eric Berne's original idea of TA, which was going to the blackboard, writing things down, very much a CBT, not paying much attention or any attention to the relationship, to where we are today, where TA is situated in a relational, intersubjective kind of way of working, and the arc that's gone. And would that reflect the book, a journey from one position to another?
In a way, yes. I mean, the 16 chapters, 16 really important people within the last 30, 40, 50 years of transaction analysis. And these articles are articles on transference, counter-transference, intersubjectivity, how to use yourself within the relationship. So these articles are moving away from Berne's idea, if you like, of the intrapsychic world and the strengthening of the adult ego state, to a far more interpersonal, co-created, intersubjective world where relationship is the cure in the service of the client.
So when you're talking about intrapsychic, what specifically does that mean in this context?
Okay, so Eric Berne devised a theory of personality, the PAC model: parent, adult, child. The idea that every moment of the day we're coming from one of these particular parts of the self, which he called ego states. And when I say intrapsychic, it means the different ego states talking internally to each other. In other words, we talk every moment of the day, you, me, we daydream and think and tell ourselves off or nurture ourselves off between the different parts of ourselves. And that's intrapsychic or internal. And Eric Berne said that as we start to understand that dynamic, we need to strengthen the adult part in the here and now to help deconfuse the child ego state and desensitize the negative parent. And that's the internal framework.
Yeah, so what he's talking about is those internal voices, the naysaying voices, those rooted in the past, that within the original idea of the therapy had to be examined and almost discounted in the service of reinforcing the adults.
Correct.
And so there's the starting point, and the arc of that is to where we find now, which is in the intersubjective place, which
Correct.
My understanding of intersubjective, it lives within two people in the therapy room. So it's not just about the one person, it's about the relationship and how that's formed and sustained.
Correct. So I think book number 23, it might be 24, but one of the earlier books that we reviewed was by a well-respected person called Martha Stark. And she talked about a book, she wrote a book, called Modes of Therapeutic Action, where she talked about the move from first psychological models to two-person psychological models. And she put Eric Berne's transaction analysis as a one-person psychological model.
How interesting.
Yeah.
How interesting. So it's quite a journey, isn't it, to move from the very early beginnings of TA, the intrapsychic, to the intersubjective, where the relationship, and I know there's some research done by Norcross, we were discussing this earlier, which kind of showed, I think, if I read the research correctly, that the relationship is the biggest part of therapeutic change.
Oh, without doubt.
So I'm guessing that the people who you talked about 16. Is it 16 contributors?
Yeah.
So what is their contribution? What are they showcasing in terms of their individual chapters?
Yeah, if we go back to the beginning with Derek Byrne, who was way up until about 1956, he was very influenced by Freudian thinking and psychodynamic thinking. Hence, he created, as I said, the PAC model, where we have an internal framework. And interestingly enough, he did also create what we call transaction analysis proper, which I've also talked about before. The idea of a theory of communication. He talked about complementary transactions, adult transactions, ulterior transactions. And so he did lend the theory to a social world, if you like, in the study of communication between two people. However, he didn't really go on to elaborate or, encourage the reader or even the therapist of those days to actually look past a first psychological model where the therapist is the educator or the expert. So as TA developed, people like William Cornell, who also we've talked about earlier on, Helena Hagedorn, later in the 1990s, Richard Erskine from the middle of the 1980s, Charlotte Stills, later on in the 1990s, started to talk about the idea of transference, counter-transference, and the importance of two people operating within a relationship. And what happens in the relationship between those two people in the room is a microcosm of what's actually happening in their relationships in the world. So if you study or work within that relationship in the here and now, in an intersubjective way, you can help the person resolve out their transferences or their conflicts in the here and now between the two people in the service of cure.
So what's played out in the therapy room is a microcosm of what's being played out in the outside world in terms of influence.
Correct.
Yeah. So
you don't have to go back, for example, to do, say, put people on cushions or talk to their internal voices, or go back to, 1992 when the father was telling off the boy in the study, where they talked to each other and he talked to the warring factions. The idea in the here and now is that you can actually work out the transference in the here and now without going back to the past. But the real emphasis is on the counter-transference and the transference in the here and now in the relationship.
Yes.
Between therapist and client.
And that's sometimes referred to as reworking the transference, isn't it?
Correct. Yeah.
The therapist realizing what's going on and being acute enough to see it and acknowledging it and bringing it into the room and saying, for instance, I am not your father, or correct, you are not 8, or
yeah. So let's look at what this is about in the here and now, that you're treating me and acting with me as if I was your father.
Yes. When
I'm not.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's a classic transferential position, isn't it? We do meet clients, and I've certainly met a fair few students who've seen me as a father figure, and having to execute that really in the service of bringing them to a adult place and a here and now place. Yeah.
Correct. So one of the wonderful articles or chapters, if you like, which I particularly like, and I think would be very useful to all, therapists beginning, started, or even in their training, talks about how to use your counter-transference and share yourself in the relationship in the service of the client. Now that's an art, that's a technique, that's something which needs to be really talked about in training. Otherwise, the narcissistic therapist who puts their own ego before the client will do more damage than actually working towards cure.
Yeah, and there's a great paragraph in a book by Carl Rogers, and I can't for the life of me remember which one it is. But he had a client who said, I bore people, I'm bored, and Rogers really reacted on that counter transference by saying, well, I feel a bit bored now.
Oh wow! Yes, that's what this is about.
Yeah,
because the narcissistic client who hasn't done their own work, hasn't worked out their own issues, for example, will be doing their own therapy rather than concentrating on what is really important in the service of the client.
Yes. Yeah.
And you see, the problem with, I think, a lot of the trainings in relationship psychotherapy, or in fact, the emphasis on how to work within the relationship, which this book, concentrates on, is what they don't say is that it's a hard gig. In other words, it takes a lot of sophistication. It needs a lot of therapy, working your own resolve the ego state conflicts out. It needs a lot of supervision so you can separate yourself out from your client before actually you can choose what to share about yourself in service of the client.
Yeah, absolutely. And also a big part of that, one of my favourite hobby horses, is of course attachment. Because if you're not sure of what your attachment style is, or you're playing out your attachments, and you've got a client who's got a different attachment, you can get into a right old mess. Quite frankly.
Oh, absolutely. So this book is a very good book in terms of understanding the importance of your own therapy and how to share your own countertransference.
Yeah. I think this is a book that would suit not only TA trainees but anyone in training.
You're absolutely right. Because
the relationship, no matter what modality you're in, is the key arbiter of a positive outcome for the client. Anything interrupts that field.
You're absolutely right. And perhaps it's for another video. But when I meet people who are going to counselling courses where I teach comparative methodology, teach TA, etc. They see TA very much, I think, as Byrne was. The PAC model, this is strengthening the adult, this is helping the adult mediate between warring factions, this is about changing thinking, and it's still the transaction analysis of the 60s and 70s, which of course is 50 or 60 years ago. So this is bringing TA up to date.
Yeah, and I think that's important as well, isn't it? Because all therapies move. And I know that you train TA therapists, and I know that a big part of your teaching and a big part of the ethos of what you teach is the modern version.
Absolutely,
is the modern version.
Because some gems in, of course, the 60s and 70s teaching and Byrne's ideas, and of course he was the godfather of transaction analysis and his parent-adult-child model. However, we're now in a two-person psychology. We're now in a world where we all know that relationship is key, and we're moving away from the expert telling us what to do. That doesn't mean there's not a place for educative therapy, but I think that the importance of understanding the relationship between therapist and client is key in modern day transaction analysis.
Yes, I was reading the other day about Martin Buber, and a very famous philosopher, influenced a lot of therapists. He talks about the I-thou relationship, not I-you, I-thou, and he chose thou specifically because he wanted a spiritual. He wanted to see a spiritual aspect of the client, the spirit of the client, not just the form.
Oh, he's a wonderful, wonderful reader.
Yeah. So we've been looking at from transactions to relations, William F. Cornell and Helena Hargenden. We'll put a link into the comments bar below downstairs. If you've read this book, then why don't you put a comment in? We'd love a comment and a like. Give us a like, and also don't forget to hit the subscribe bell. So every time we upload another video, then you're going to be reminded and come back. So as always, Bob, thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.